the crowd is going wild. A brand new season, that championship style. Big plays are coming, the rivalry's real. Get ready for that Pigskin Frenzy feel. It's college football, yeah, you know the deal. This is Pigskin Frenzy. Pigskin Frenzy.
Man, if you guys want to hear anything on LSU stuff in the sports media space, in the college football content creation space, media space, man, we have our guy. We do. We have our guy right here live in living color. We have the one and only Blake Ruffino from AYS Sports with us. I'm super fired up to have him on the show today, guys. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Pigskin Frenzy on this beautiful Thursday afternoon. Thank you for joining us. I'm Joel Norris, and whether you're watching on YouTube, listening on Spotify, Podbean, and Apple, a big thank you for taking some time out of your Thursday to just sit back, watch, and listen. Some college football coverage presented by us. For watching on YouTube, subscribe to the channel, guys. Spotify, Podbean, and Apple. All you got to do is just share around with others and follow on there as well. True Voice Digital, that's our exclusive home of Pigskin Frenzy. Catch us on there as well for inspired faith-based content and exclusive unfiltered analysis from the prodigy of college football himself. And our socials are X, Instagram, and TikTok for Pigskin Frenzy. Just type in at Pigskin_Frenzy and hit that follow button as well. And our website's www.pigskinfrenzy.weebly.com. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to try my best, my man, to not screw up this intro because he is the man. He is the myth, the legend in terms of LSU football. He is the creator of AYS Sports, just recently joined up with Go 24/7, 24/7 Sports, and CBS Sports. He is the co-host of the Ruffino and Joe show, hosted by Joe DeLeon as well. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to golf clap for him. Blake Ruffino.
Thank you, man.
Absolutely.
Thank you. I appreciate you having me. It's going to be fun.
Absolutely, man. It feels like it's just a busy season, if that makes sense, or off season at least, like going into the season. Like it's been really active with stuff going on in DC right now. The Sorsby situation, we probably won't get into that much, but there's a lot of stuff, the playoff expansion, we're going to probably talk about that. But there's just a lot of stuff going on in the off season that's happening for us, right? So before we get into all that and how busy the off season is and everything, let's talk about you with AYS Sports. I know, how you created it and everything. Do you get a chance though during everything going on now, because you're so busy now, do you get the chance to just unplug and just disconnect?
No, not even remotely close. I think maybe right now, because LSU, as an example, isn't, from a baseball standpoint, they're not in the postseason, so a little bit able to kind of unplug there and just watch some baseball. But, I always felt like I was playing double duty, because really June the 1st starts for us, the start of the push from a national college football standpoint, Joel, that, have we hit all the teams? Have we talked about all the things? And normally what happens in college athletics is everybody tries to cram in legislation before the college football season starts. So like if you see Ted Cruz's bill or with Maria Cantwell, they're all coming out trying to do that. So no, not really. This has been a pretty busy offseason, I would say. But I guess a little bit, but not really, because there's, now with going with 24/7 and CBS, it's kind of like drinking through a fire hose a little. But no, it's been good. I don't really like sitting. There have been times where I just sat there and what are we even doing? So it's nice to stay busy. I like to unplug. Now, normally in July, I like to unplug before the college football season starts, because obviously that's when all hell breaks loose. So, but it is nice to kind of, I said this week, it was nice to actually watch some baseball without having to completely panic if 18 to 22-year-olds were going to get to a super regional or a regional. Or through a regional, but it also kind of sucks because they're not there. And, now you're having to talk about specifically only two topics: recruiting from a portal standpoint for baseball, and then you're talking about hey man, we're going to start getting into football here on the field. And so it's fun, but it is what it is.
Is there any team that you got in baseball right now that LSU's out of it?
No, I don't really care. Like I just watch baseball. Like I'm still human like everybody else. I like Little Rock being there. I like Kyle Poly being there. You root for the underdog. A lot of those guys from Little Rock last year who gave LSU all they can handle, probably the team that gave them the most problems, if we're being honest, in the postseason. Well, now they're in a super regional. So it's fun to root for them. I was keeping my eyes pretty lockstep and key on Southern Miss. I think Southern Miss, baseball wise, this is completely out of context now, right field. I think they've done some things where they need to change their philosophy. They have this old school way of thinking, getting rid of some guys that they have no business getting rid of, and then they get skull drug pretty much in their own regional. So I definitely kept my eyes on that. But no, not really. Joe, I look at this and just say that everybody wants to brag about this conference or that conference. Well, the Big Ten and the ACC's top two teams just went out, and I'm just like, of course they did. And that's what makes baseball probably the best. People talk about parity in college football, which I don't necessarily believe completely. But I look at baseball, and if there is parity, that's the sport that's got the most parity of the big three.
Yeah. We're definitely going to get into that, though. As you mentioned, the ACC, Big 12. We got a lot to talk about with that in terms of the playoff as well. So, man, that AYS hat, by the way,
thank you.
You're rocking it, man. You're rocking it. So, I do want to talk about that. Talk about your beginning at AYS. As you feel like in your heart, like, okay, this is the route. Because I'm a faithful man on this show. Where we believe in Jesus in our show, so we give him all the glory for being on this show. And it's not only that, for creating this show, because we give him all the glory for it. Do you feel like this was your calling necessarily to kind of be in sports media?
I don't know if I necessarily say it was my calling. Maybe, it was just really started off as a hobby, in 2017, 2016, I saw a need, and I'm not trying to disparage guys that are in the media, but from a local standpoint, I got to a place where like they're talking about the game and breaking down the game. And we saw it in a completely different lens, or I saw it in a completely different lens than they did. I didn't understand some of the things they were saying, and I was like, that's not what's happening. And so, to be completely honest with you, I just was like, wanted to start it and see what happens, give my own thoughts. I never really thought in the beginning that it would turn into what it was. I always had faith in myself that I could if I wanted to. So I just started doing videos, and then really where AYS got started was I was a face that no one really knew in the very beginning. Like we broke the Bo Pelini or Steve Ensminger news for LSU, and it kind of got national attention because you had Yahoo Sports, you had at the time, ironically, 24/7. You had a lot of these people that were in traditional media that they were coming down and saying that's not true. And I'm like, well, I talked to the dude. So I'm pretty confident that he's going there. So that's where it really started, was from an information base, and took a lot of heat. And I think from an LSU side of things, there's a lot of independent media now, because I feel like of what, I don't want to say what I started, but there's more LSU podcasts than I think of any other sport or any other team in the SEC, just individualized. And I think that is because of where we kind of came from. So in about 2020, I don't mean this in any kind of way, but I think you remember when those stimulus checks went out. Yeah. I got a stimulus check, and I was just sitting at home, and we all weren't doing anything. And I looked my wife in the face. I'm like, all right, well, if I have any chance of doing this, I got to go now because they're making us all sit at home. So I went to Best Buy. I sat in a line for 3.5 hours because, if you remember, only like 2 or 3 people could be in a store at a time. I went into Best Buy. I waited for 3.5 hours. I took that stimulus check, took the cash, bought all of the stuff I needed, like a Rode, you'll know this, but like a Rode, microphones, a desktop, laptop, all those kinds of stuff at the very beginning of it, and just went to town. And then I just kept doing it. And I was having a whole bunch of fun doing it. I very much enjoyed myself, and I was doing it every day. And so then my wife looked at me and goes, if you're going to do this, you gotta get paid. You can't just be away from the family if you're not going to get paid. So I called 3 buddies of mine who luckily own their own businesses. It's like, y'all got to give me $100 a month so my wife tells me I can keep doing this. So they all 3 give me $100 a piece per month to do it. And I was like, see, I'm making $300. It's a car payment. At the time, now you can't get a car for $300.
Yeah.
And so I was just like, hey, I'm going to give this to you. This is your car payment. You don't have to pay for your car. And if we want to justify it, it's a car payment. And so then it just kind of took off, like getting into the season in 2020 and then, kind of talking about Orgeron being fired before it ever happened. The Thursday before the Florida game, I was like, guys, I'm hearing that Ed Orgeron's getting fired, and took a lot of heat for it. And then, that Sunday Ed Orgeron had been moved on from. And so just consistency, Joel, just keep doing it. Keep doing it. Keep doing it. So then around 2021, I was like, man, I love LSU, but I know that we can do more, or I know that I can do more. And I'm just a college football fanatic. I'm sure a lot like yourself.
Oh.
And so we started doing these Saturday morning shows, and Joe DeLeon was the producer. And so Joe DeLeon came on one show, one time, 15-minute segment. And in that 15-minute segment, we posted on Twitter, we posted on TikTok, we posted on all these things, or Facebook, wherever. And it gets like 400,000 views, and people are like going after us. And I just looked at Joe and I'm like, look, dude, I could tell right now you don't need to produce anything. You need to be on air. So then we launched Ruffino and Joe show. And so it, just a steady build. And I feel like, having that experience of how to build a YouTube channel, of how to build social media, of how to do things kind of propelled us to kind of go in there from a jump of a head start. And so after the first couple of years, we're just growing. And then last year we doubled in every single size, subscribers, views. And, we were, I don't mean this in any kind of way, but from a viewership standpoint on YouTube, Ruffino and Joe was top 5 in the college football space and so it just really exploded. And so then, around January, and just continuing to be consistent, grind, never really thought, Joel, never once reached out to anybody. Like, I wasn't thinking about CBS. I wasn't thinking about, some of the other companies that in this process had reached out to us after the season, because we had been talking to two or three outlets, major outlets. And so we never really thought about it. We just put our head down and kind of went to work. And so in January, CBS reached out and they were like, hey, AYS, Ruffino and Joe's killing it. And I think, and I love like Adam Stanko's the VP. I love the partnership that we have with CBS, but I think, and doing that from 2020 and seeing the vision of like, hey, I know that this is going to work. I know from an X's and O's standpoint, I feel like from a local standpoint, there's not a lot of people there. And, like from a national standpoint, there are guys that are X's and O's guys, but they don't do this every day. They like Herb Street's not being talked to every day. I leaned on guys like Josh Pate, who's a great friend of mine, and just leaned on like, hey, me and Josh do things completely different. Right? Like he's more of like analytical on how it goes. And I'm like, no, dude, this is what just I see from an X's and O's standpoint.
Yeah.
And so just kind of leaning in on what is my niche and what do we bring to the table? And so basically in January, they, CBS and a couple other outlets reached out to us. And it was very quick that we found that CBS and 24/7 with Adam Stanko was who we would want to partner with because of how they do things. And so that's basically in a 10-minute, monologue of how it just started. I tell content creators this, all the time. Stay consistent. I remember when 7 people were in the chat. Like I'm talking to my mom, my dad, my brother, and a couple cousins. I did that for years, Joel, like nobody ever listening. And now, it gets to a place where from a Ruffino and Joe standpoint, we can just turn on the camera and say, hey, everybody, bye, everybody. And 20,000 people are going to be in there watching. Yeah. Like 2,000 people are going to be watching live every single time we hit that live button. And so that's just kind of like I went through all of the struggles and all of this so that now that we can benefit the rewards. And I just, dude, I didn't know what I didn't know. I learned a lot. I failed a lot. And I think that's the thing, too. It's like, I failed a lot. I learned a lot in failure. And so just being consistent. And I think the three things: being consistent, but be yourself. Don't try to be somebody you're not. Like,
Right.
I feel like people think that I put on a character to some extent there, when you're on camera, you put on a caricature. However, I feel like I try to be the same dude that you're going to see on cameras, the same dude you're going to get out in public. I don't really know how else to be. So it's just being yourself. What do you provide and put to the table that people are going to like? And so that's where we came. That's how I try to do it now. And look, I'm not by any means on the top of this game. We're going to be there because I just feel like I have a relentless pursuit of doing it. And so last but not least, I think that this past year, 2025, was the biggest year for me without a doubt. The Lane Kiffin thing, I'll never forget this. The Thursday, me and my wife were going out to eat with her brother and his wife and my sister-in-law. And I did a Thursday show and I go, hey, this is the four things of how the Lane Kiffin thing is going to break down. This is exactly what's going to happen. And those four things happened in order within a 72-hour span, and the episode went nuclear, right? Like, I think it was the whole episode was 175,000 downloads, views, listens. And I'm like, oh my God, what's going on here? I had national people reaching out. They were like, hey, dude, just listened. You're spot on, hearing the same stuff. Big time reporters at ESPN, CBS, like, hey, dude, just listened. And I'm like, first off, where did you get my number? Because I have never talked to you a day in my life. And so I think that it was just, again, being prepared for the moment, being consistent, and never really letting anybody say no. Like, regardless of what happened on social media or whatever happened, good or bad, we're going to be there at 7 p.m. Central Standard Time, whether you liked it or not.
Man, I love how you ended it. Mic drop there. That was good. And you mentioned consistency too, which I love, because that's what you got to be. You got to be really consistent in this. And that kind of leads to my follow-up question, because I was going to ask about CBS Sports, but you kind of answered that a little bit already. So to kind of follow up with the consistency aspect of it and just being consistent in this space. And not only that, in this space overall, do you feel like this is where kind of our space is headed, like college football media? Like, I get ESPN and the big time TV for football and everything, but for talk shows, right? For analytical, for weekday talk shows to predict the games and all that, do you feel like this is where people like me and people like you come in? Like, is this where the space is headed, do you feel like?
Oh, 100%. And I saw that in 2020. Like I saw it in 2020 when, at the end of the playoff, we're doing some videos and, things like that. And LSU obviously winning a national title in January of 2020, doing some stuff around there. I was like, dude, this is going to kill it. And like, I knew that the media was shifting, and you kind of got to get a little political, but not really.
Yeah.
I saw the political landscape changing with how technology and AI was coming. When Elon went out there and said, hey, AI is going to be okay. Well, the search for knowledge is going to be there. And so really, I think, and again, not to go into too much detail on it, I think that, like On3, CBS, Yahoo, name the ESPN did it with one massive one in McAfee, who kind of runs, the podcasting world at the current moment. But you look at it, that's where they have to go, because people aren't reading articles. Right. People want to see the interaction. Now, the old school people will read, but it's the reach that people in our space are getting. So to give you an idea, like during the football season, like Ruffino and Joe show was getting no less than 100 million reach per month. Like that is ridiculous. And so when you look at those numbers, they're like, dude, do what? And then when you show the demographics of where everybody's at, that's a reach that they can't get by just posting on social media. And so I think the world is changing in reference to, like, you'll look at even the political space. Who are the people that are there? Like Rogan, Sean Ryan, you name whoever you want to name. But it is the late night TV host has changed or the sports world has changed in the sense of that they would rather have the conversation or listen or talk because they don't want things to get political, or they want to talk about subjects or situations that are very interesting to them. And they want to unplug from the regular world. And so that is, in 2020, I told my wife, I was like, look, podcasting is going to be the number one thing. And at some point, these big time companies are going to have to make moves, because the truth of the matter is like they can do stuff, or they can try to do stuff. But the number one thing that people are going to is this: TikTok, Facebook, they're going there. And so that, yes, it's where the media world is going, but it's going there more than just sports. I think sports is the last thing that they're trying to do. Or the first thing that they're trying to do, because they're going to try to buy it all up, but they're getting whooped. I mean, from a perspective, I mean, you can't look at some of these shows and say that, like, Pate, ourselves, Crane and Co., you name them, you can't see that, like, okay, well, they're beating our rear ends. They're beating us really bad. And so having that partnership, and so I think that lining up with, like, for us, for CBS, they understood that from the very beginning. Like, hey, we understand where this is going. We can give you a platform to be there and to do that. And so I'm like, okay. And they were just real people. We forget with these big companies that there's real people that run them. And so people are like, oh, well, they're corporate. Yeah, they are corporate to some extent. And you got to go through that corporate world. But at the same time, I would probably take a bullet for Adam Stanko. And we've only known each other for 6 months. And so that's that. I mean, I hate to keep going down that rabbit hole with you, Joel, but it's just the truth of, like, how this media world is being built. And now, like, I don't mean this any way. You can just go on YouTube. The number one show on YouTube from an LSU content perspective, without views being bought, let me throw that in there, is us. And so that's just because you're there every day. And again, I do think because of how the media landscape is working now, people are like, hey, I can't, I got to go listen.
And what I like about you too is you said this is going to happen. So you're kind of manifesting it too. You're speaking it into being. I did that with I had Ross Dellinger on my show Tuesday.
Okay.
And I was saying to myself, like, you know what? In the future, like, name dropping, like, man, I would love to have Ross Dellinger on my show to talk about this, to talk about that.
Mm-hmm.
I have Ross Dellinger on my show on Tuesday, right? So you kind of just manifest things and you kind of just speak it into being. So that's what I love about you, because you kind of spoke things into being. And now here we are, AYS, one of the top, for LSU sports content. There we are, Ruffino and Joe show, one of the top in the college football media space. So I love that you manifested a lot of what you said.
Oh, no one was going to tell me no. I mean, Joe, I hate to be a cocky little. I know we talked about Jesus already here, so I'm not going to curse, but a tard. Look, man, there were times where people tried to, let me just give you this, because I tell all the independent media people this. Do you know how many times people try to run me out of this? Like underhanding me and doing crazy stuff. And you can't let it affect you. Right. Because now what do you do? Now what are you going to do? And those same people didn't say a word when we were trending on Twitter because CBS and us partnered. They didn't say anything. Of course you didn't. But we're coming for you, as Ed Orson. We're coming, and we're not backing down. You can't back down for what? You're gonna mess up. You're gonna get info wrong. You're gonna there are things that we're not perfect. By the grace of God, we're not perfect, and by grace we're saved. But at the same time, it's like this is all that I want to do. Like, Joe, I wake up and I'm like, coming from the place that I did come from for a decade, I mean, no, you get to tell me what I do, and no one was going to tell me no. And let me just say this: I had people in my family who thought I wouldn't do this, that I couldn't make it, in my own family, and like I use that as rocket fuel. Like, I am going. Like, first off, just because you don't understand something doesn't mean it's not going to work. Just because it's not a quote unquote normal job doesn't mean it's not going to work. And so then, to be completely blunt with you, I was a slap in their face when we signed with CBS to be like, who ain't going to do what?
Yeah.
Who ain't going to do what? Who? Me? The crazy narcissist that you keep calling me? Yeah, me? Yeah, you should have known it was coming. You called me it. Well, that's what's going to happen. You got to have the mindset of just because a rival may have a guest on or this, stay consistent, Neil. It's going to work.
And man, I feel like you got the best mindset for it. So man, again, another golf.
You got to be you got to be a look. You got to be in this media. Look, here's the biggest lie about this media space. You got to be a complete douchebag sometimes. I mean, you do because people are going to try to run you over. Screw them. Screw them. This is what I also learned. They ain't going to say nothing to your face. This media world is filled with a bunch of nerdy dudes. And I'm just like, look, man, say it to my face now. We're out in public. Let's roll with it. And that's a different topic for a different day. But you're not going to tell me no. You're not going to. And I think, Joel, here's another thing too. When coaches started coming on our show, when coaches started retweeting our stuff, when they started interacting with us, like Lane is the one pushing the CBS news. Okay, just being blunt. I mean, I didn't ask him to do that. Okay, and so then it was like, all right, well, what do we do? There's nothing we can really do now. Okay, of course there was nothing you can do.
Man, you said they're not going to say no, right?
Yeah,
and
never going to say no.
And I feel like this is a good segue into what we're going to talk about now, but I feel like that's where the Big Ten's at right now and saying, okay, we're going to make them say yes. 24-16, that's the biggest topic, in the sport right now, in terms of offseason at least. Are we going to go to 16, 24? We're just going to keep it at 12.
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of people have heard me. You probably heard me. I don't think we should expand. I've said that for the longest time. I don't think we should expand. But in your eyes, do you think we should expand? Why or why not? Do you think it's a dumb idea if we did expand?
I've been very vocal on this. I don't think that we should expand. I do think it's idiotic. You haven't figured out the 12-team playoff, and you're not trying to figure out a 24-team playoff. Where I'm at is that everybody, and we talked about this a little bit earlier about parity. I don't believe that there's parity in college football right now. People look at Vandy and they're like, oh, Vandy. People look at Indiana. Well, Indiana's an outlier. I can look at 2000 and say, well, was LSU an outlier? When Nick Saban got to LSU, was it an outlier? Because Indiana's always had good football. Ask Notre Dame. Now, Notre Dame's a different beast because it's a national brand. But I look at games, and what bothers me is like conference championship games going away. Would you want to take away Indiana versus Ohio State? Like, that's a joke to me.
Right.
But I look at Tennessee getting skull drug. Indiana in the first year when they made the playoff getting skull drug. Boise State. Texas Tech didn't score a point, by the way. And so now you want to expand it, and you're talking about having more access and getting more teams in. Of course, coaches. Mike Elko said it the best. Of course, coaches want more and want more people to get in because that makes their job a lot easier. And I'm just looking at this and saying it has nothing to do with the competitiveness of college football. It devalues not only the playoff from the 12 team, it devalues the regular season because a 9-3 team can get in. Everybody talks about on rivalry weekend, well, people aren't going to sit their players. Are you sure? Because outside of Ohio State and Texas versus Texas A&M, there are not really massive rivals. Like as an example, let's just say LSU's 10-1. Okay, they can't get to the SEC championship game, regardless of what they do, and they play Arkansas. Why in the good wide world would you risk dudes getting hurt when you're about to go into a playoff, regardless if you lost or not? Why would you do that? If there's nothing else that you can get from that. Now, maybe you can say, well, we're going to have a little bit of a layoff or whatever, but college football would then start within 10 days. The playoff would start within 10 days. I think that they are just chasing for the almighty dollar, Joel, and they don't even know what they don't know. I say this with all due disrespect. And yes, I said disrespect. I don't think Tony Petitti, nor do I think Greg Sankey have a good God dog understanding of what they're doing. Look at yesterday as an example. Okay. They had been moaning and complaining about getting Congress and litigation for the college sports world. They got it. By the way, the 5 points that were in the bill were the 5 points that they gave Ted Cruz 6 months ago. And then now they're saying, we don't agree with it. We don't agree with it. Are you kidding me? Now they want to branch out from the NCAA and College Sports Commission because NIL deals aren't getting approved. And they look at that and say, well, we can't do that now. What took you so long? What took you so long? So all of this kind of commingles in one of it. It's all about the almighty dollar. They don't care about the competitiveness of the game. They don't care about the regular season, the postseason. They don't care. It's all about the dollar. And I'm about tired of pretending that Greg Sankey or Tony Petitti, for that matter, think that they know what's best. What's a 3 technique? If I had a question for Greg Sankey, what's a 3 tech? What does a backside guard do against a 3 tech on opposite side zone? If you can't answer that question, stop telling me that you know or you think that you know what's best for the sport when you have no idea. You're a baseball dude. And so you're trying to apply baseball logic to this. Do I think 16 teams, would I care about that? I still would care about it. But you haven't even perfected a 12-team playoff, and you say, well, let's just expand it. No. Why don't you do an at-large team? By the way, people keep talking about going to the BCS, which is so dumb. Okay, if you want to do 24 teams, like we talked about this in Ruffino and Joe a while back. Yeah. You have Notre Dame versus Houston in round 1. You have Miami versus JMU in round 1. You have, I think it was Alabama. Forgive me, I forget the teams in order, but it was Alabama versus Tulane. Then it was, I forget the teams, and how it shaked out.
I think North Texas is one of them too.
North Texas, right. It was like, it was Texas versus North Texas. Yeah, good luck. Yeah, good luck. So those are the things, Joel, that I look at and say, so we're canceling conference championship weekend. Who's the champion of the conferences, by the way? For what exactly? For that? No. And so, and the last thing I would say is everybody calls me an SEC homer. Okay. 13 of the 16 teams in the conference had top 15 strengths of schedule, and you did nothing for them. Like, Joel, think about this for just a moment. Okay. Let me ask you this question. Let's say that your team plays a tougher schedule, has one more loss, but they beat a team that has one more win than you, but they played on the field. Why is Texas not in over Oklahoma? Our logic, right? Like our logic of why Texas wasn't in over Oklahoma. Well, they got one more win. What's your point? Texas had 2 massive wins over playoff teams, Oklahoma and Texas A&M. Guess who should have been in? Well, because they lost to Ohio State and to Florida and to Georgia, they're like, oh, well, we can't do that. They're 2-3 against 2-2 against playoff teams. What are we doing? They don't even understand that, and that's why I have a problem with them. And the last thing I'd say, who are the teams that are winning? The number 1 overall seed and the team that spent the most amount of money and had the most talent. Go figure.
Yeah, and the head-to-head win, too. Texas over Oklahoma badly. It was not even a close game. So,
well,
and I agree with you there.
Even though in the first year of the 12-team playoff, too, Clemson versus South Carolina meant nothing. It meant nothing. Who was the better team? Who was the better team? And we're like, well, they lost to Alabama. I don't care about that. Clemson has no business being in the playoff just because they won a Rudy Poo conference. Zero reason to be in. So again, they're gonna have to go to at large, and everybody's like, we want everybody to have equal, equality, which is basically what they're saying. Guess what sports is, Joel? Just throwing this out there to you. You go on the field to find out who's not equal.
Right.
Right. Even that process is really dumb to me.
And that's why I keep saying, and you probably heard me say this before too, wins have to matter. Wins have to matter. Going on the field has to matter. And
Right.
it's all about, okay, proving it on the field. Why are we expanding when they are, okay, we lost? Oh, that stinks. We should expand it. No, dude, you lost. Better luck next year. In the
Right.
words of Happy Gilmore when he didn't make the hockey team, better luck next year. So that's what it's all about for me as well. I know we got to wrap things up as we're going to talk about some LSU football here. One thing before we go to the LSU topic, the calendar. That's what
Yeah.
should really be fixed is the calendar instead of expanding the playoff. I've been a component of that is to fix the calendar. How do you feel about that?
It would fix about 95% of their problems.
Yeah.
What's the Lane Kiffin rule, by the way? The Lane Kiffin rule that is going into Congress is that coaches can't leave their team until the end of their season.
Yeah.
Okay. You know how to completely change that rule? Why don't you change the schedule? It's a Christmas miracle. Why is it that they're trying to change every single little thing besides the schedule that completely broke college football last year?
Right.
Why isn't anybody asking that question? I know that I am, but that's another thing that I talk about with the NCAA, with Tony Petitti and Greg Sankey. Y'all all moaned and complained, oh my God. And the one thing that you had to change, you didn't change. Joe, I've given multiple occasions what I think that they should do. It is of my opinion that they need to move the portal back to the spring unless you get an addendum that says that high school players can come into the spring, which they're already having to do and early enroll. Okay, you should move everything back. You keep talking about the NFL model. You're not the NFL. Lamar Brown, who's the number one player in the country, is not going to Kent State, who was the worst team in the country last year.
Right.
So until we start doing every single little thing that the NFL does, you're not the NFL model. With that being said, it's of my opinion that you need to move spring back, meaning the portal back into the spring. You need to move signing day, if you're not enrolling, back into February or March. And everybody's like, well, when do coaches have time? Well, when are you not going to get paid $13 to $15 million? Yeah. So first and foremost, I don't want to hear about your time. I also think that spring football's got to go away. I think that in June and July, you should open up OTAs and mini camps. I think that you should allow coaches to be in there in all of the month of July to prep for the season. I think that would be helpful for offense and defensive line reps and development. I think it would be better for development overall. And then that way you have 95 days before you go into the season where you're actually working. So with that being said, yes, the schedule has got to change. This would be a very easy fix if they had a pulse. Again, they don't, and they're buffoons.
All they see is it's like the quote Josh Pate. It's just an ATM. So
the Bible says that you don't call someone a fool unless they're making fool antics. This is fool antics. Yeah. This is the dumbest thing that they can do. Again, they're complaining about so many other things, about the one thing that they can change that they refuse to change.
And it's a fix right there. Like, this is the fix, the general fix. This can fix a lot of the problems.
They can do it tomorrow. They could all do it tomorrow. But coaches don't want to have the portal in spring because they still have spring football. Okay, we'll move spring football back. Give them open the summer months. I mean, it's not that difficult. Give them 90 days to prep. But again, you have a former governor, you have a baseball guy, and you have a TV guy that are all running the sport.
Yeah.
Again, what does a backside guard do against a 3-tech on opposite side zone? If any three of those can answer that question for me, I'll shut up. But they're not going to be able to.
I retweeted, and then we're going to go into the LSU and wrap things up. But I retweeted a good friend of mine, Jake Crane. Shout out to Jake Crane. He's been on the show before. Awesome guy. He tweeted about the college football playoff schedule. I said, well.
Dumb.
I said, well, you know how we can fix everything? Let's just expand the playoff even more, right? Because there was talking about the calendar needed to be fixed. They're like, this is a horrible schedule or whatever. I said, you know what we should do? Let's expand the playoff even more. So I created a joke on that, but I was like, all seriousness, I've said this for the past year. fix the calendar. I mean, it's the most simple thing. And you mentioned one name, and we'll wrap up now with LSU. And you mentioned Lane Kiffin here in Baton Rouge. This is kind of a multi-breakdown question. So, number one, when you found out that, okay, this is who LSU was going to go get, right? They were kind of targeting Lane Kiffin to be their next head coach. What were your excitement level to that? And that's number one. Number two, how do you feel or kind of assessing LSU heading into 2026 as well?
Yeah, so a couple of things there, okay? Number one, was I excited about Lane leaving Ole Miss to come to LSU? Yes, because I think he's the best offensive play caller in college football. I knew that his staff would probably follow him and players would come here with him. That is a high level of excitement. However, I thought so Joe, I've chronicalized this a lot. I knew that Thursday, the show that we talked about, I knew probably about 10 to 11 days before it actually went down that this was over and that it was going to be official because Ole Miss, came into Hammond and Florida came into Hammond trying to go talk to John Summerall before they, so I was like, well, Ole Miss isn't trying to go talk to John Summerall if Lane Kiffin's staying. Okay. So I just made some phone calls and knew. But the impact for me wasn't because I was ecstatic about, and still am ecstatic about Lane being here. Don't get me wrong. But it also signified that LSU put their best foot forward for Lane, and that meant that they were going to go spend the money to go get great players, which had been a problem under Brian Kelly. So it was a complete shift. And so I think the overall excitement, Lane included, was that LSU was doing what they needed to do to be elite and then bringing in an elite coach to do that. So that was more of my excitement level is that, oh, my God, they're actually going to do it. Like they're actually going to pull this off. And so that was the part for me. I'm like, dang, they're going to Lane wouldn't take this if they're not going to spend the money. Yeah. Then he walks to the podium and the first thing he says is that Jimmy Sexton said no one had more money and people that were targeting you more than LSU. And I'm like, oh my God, what planet are we on right now? Like this, because you're going from a guy who didn't necessarily care because of his AD and Scott Woodward, and Scott hamstrung a lot of things and needed to go. And then now to Verge Osbury's like, look, man, I don't care what you do. Let's go win. Let's win. And so that's where I was like, oh my God, this is really happening. This is what LSU is going to do. And for all intents and purposes for right now, they have done it.
Absolutely. How do you feel about everything heading into 2026? I know the week 3 matchup is the one everyone's looking forward to. I mean, I'm looking forward to it. Hopefully I can get down to Oxford for that one. But how do you feel overall about their season? Just besides the Ole Miss game, like how do you feel what the impact he's making already? I mean, he's got high-level recruits coming in there, high school-wise and transfer portal. I mean, the number 1 transfer portal class already. So how do you feel about what he's doing there, the moves he's making, and what is your outlook kind of like preview of the 2026 season looking like for you with LSU?
Yeah, so I think there's a couple of things. I think they showed a lot of stuff during the spring. I like the run game. I think Dylan Jones, the running back, was a massive find. I think their wide receiver core has a lot of depth and explosiveness to it. I think Trey Green has an offensive coordinator or offensive system that can get him into the right spot. I think that they did a lot of really positive stuff along the interior and exterior of the offensive line. I really liked what I've seen there. Defensively, Blake Baker has done a fantastic job. And here's just the thing. They brought in dudes. You don't win without dudes. And so I'm very confident about like where Sam Levitt's going, but I feel like that I've put 1,000 puzzle pieces together and I'm missing the one in the dead center, and that being Sam Levitt. And so when we get out there in the fall, it just goes down to, okay, how does he look? How is this timing? He's been putting in all of the work. And so those are going to be the questions. Like if this offensive line still gets pushed, we were at 3 of the 4 scrimmages. If they're still running the football the way that they are, I think LSU is going to be more than fine. I think that they're going to do a lot of really good things because if you don't run the football, you're not going to win.
Absolutely.
So I think going into the season, it really starts off with this first month. You got Clemson, you have Ole Miss, and you have Texas A&M. And if you can, let's just hypothetically say, let's say they go 3-1, 4-1 in that stretch. I think you look at this and be like, okay, can they go up against Texas and Alabama? Because the middle part of their schedule, I don't want to say is easy, but it's more relatable. I think they can beat a Kentucky, an Auburn, a Mississippi State. But then you get into that final month where you got Alabama, Texas, and then you have to go to Tennessee. That's where you're like, okay, well, you can go 3-1, 4-1 in the beginning. Well, then you got to go 2 or 3-1 down that stretch. You know, I think FaZe and Brandon, it looks like he's going to start at Tennessee. Ken Lane, who's probably going to have 2 of these going back to Tennessee. You know, how's that atmosphere going to be? That's going to be a crazy one too. But where is he in his development if he's the ultimate starter at Tennessee? I think Texas is the most athletic team in the country. Top to bottom doesn't mean that you win when you say that. But you're going up against a lot of really good teams. Just Keelan Russell went out at Alabama. So we're going to have to figure all that out. But, you know, Bud Elliott and I had this debate last week. He thinks that their schedule's soft. And I'm like, you mean to tell me going up against Ole Miss, Texas A&M, Clemson, Texas, Alabama, and Lane personally having to go back to Tennessee, that's easy? No. Truth of the matter is that you got to go 4-2 in that stretch.
Really?
Okay, you got to go 4-2. And so I think that they can be there. I think this can be a top 30 defense. Yet again, I think they got the steal of the portal and Todd Benefield. They can get there. It just all depends on how do they come out of that first month. They come out of there 3-1, 4-1. I feel very confident about where they sit and where they stand moving forward.
Absolutely. Man, mic drop for Blake Ruffino. Guys, round of applause for him being on the show today. Man, we are out of time. I know you got a busy schedule, so I'll let you go, guys. A huge thank you for just tuning in on this beautiful Thursday afternoon. Just sit back and listen to some college ball coverage presented by us. If you're watching on YouTube, subscribe to the channel, like each episode, leave comments down below. Spotify, Podbean, and Apple. All you got to do is just share around with others and follow on there as well. X, Instagram, and TikTok is at Pigskin_Frenzy. Catch us on True Voice Digital as well, exclusive home of Pigskin Frenzy. Man, guys, we give all the praise to the Lord for this, because without him, we would not be doing this show. We're so thankful for you guys tuning in. Man, I mean, 110,000 views on YouTube now. So we're climbing. We are climbing. And hopefully, Blake, we'll have you back on the show as well, because you're the man, dude. You're awesome. So, guys, we'll be back on Tuesday for more Pigskin Frenzy. We'll hope you have a great weekend. I'm Joel Norris. We're signing off. That's Blake Ruffino from AYS Sports and 24/7 and CBS Sports. Guys, for everybody out there, please and always stay the course.